So, of course, not everything is perfect.
It really is.
Well, you're right.
It really is, but sometimes you're standing in a more resistant place and you can't
Right.
see it that way.
Right. Actually, thank you. That's actually a better way of thinking of that. So, I've heard the vortex, and I've been in the vortex many times, and I've been out of the vortex many times. Yeah. And in general, my life is great. I live up in the hills. I have, a great family. And when I'm in the vortex, sometimes I get thrown out of it, or I throw myself out of it, I guess.
So let's say that often I'm in the receptive mode, but sometimes, because I haven't practiced the momentum of it relative to a subject long enough, I can't maintain it, so I lose my reception. And when I do, it's like being thrown out. Being in the receptive mode of non-resistance feels so good, and anything else feels less good.
So is it possible to be in the vortex and also partially out of it?
Well, see, what you're doing here, you're helping us to have this conversation that we're wanting to have. Only, let's say that someone else is looking at your life, and they're saying, well, that person has no reason to ever complain about anything. He's got a dog with a cold, wet nose, and lives in the hills and has this wonderful family and life, but nobody else has the relativity that you have of knowing what true alignment and true open path feels like in relationship to something that's closed off a little bit. So yes, when we speak of this vortex, which is constantly changing, we're talking about you all staying up to speed with the changes. So the conversation that we had earlier today about, well, this feels better than this and this feels better than this, it's always going to be that way. You're never going to reach the place while you are here in this physical form where there is no contrast for you to make a choice about. But the better you get at selfishly, meaning hocus pocus focus, at selfishly making the choices for yourself that feel the best so that you get really good at catching them in the early subtle stages, then your alignment is such that you've worked the ripples out, and to anyone looking on you'd look like you're always in the vortex, and to yourself you would say, well, maybe being in the vortex or out of the vortex isn't exactly this distinction that I'm wanting to make now. Maybe it's more and more alignment and more and more alignment and more and more alignment. Right. In other words, because the vortex isn't a place, and it really isn't exactly a condition. It's a relationship with who you really are. It's your relationship to your path. And really, we want to say this is what you're reaching for. We thank you very much for bringing it right here, because this is the next step in all of this. Since the vortex is not a place, and since the expansion and evolution of who you are is eternally ongoing, then rather than talking about being in the vortex, let's just talk about being on the path. Let's just talk about being in the direction of the vortex. Let's just talk about moving in the direction of your expansion rather than in resistance to your expansion. Can you feel the refinement that we're giving this? So is there going to always be more? Yes. Or sometimes you're going to be a little resistance to the more? Yeah. Or sometimes you're going to be extra resistant to it? Yeah, because you've got some beliefs and habits and blind spots and so forth that sort of trip you up. But that's why we are so eager to have this conversation about the path of least resistance. You know how in your humanness, in your humanness, you have sort of mass conscious beliefs about things. So let's say that you're interacting with someone. It doesn't matter if it's a personal relationship, it doesn't matter if it's a work relationship, you're interacting with someone, you're just bumping up against them all the time. Bump, 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 bump. So there is a school of thought that says, and you might even picked up some of it in this environment, well, just look for the positive aspects. Just look for the positive aspects. Just look for the positive aspects. Ignore what you don't want and accentuate what you do want. So you do that. You ignore what you don't want and you accentuate what you do want. And bump, 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 because you don't control anybody else's reality. And so we want to ask you, is walking with this person your path of least resistance? And sometimes people will say, well, isn't that what you're teaching us, Abraham? Aren't we supposed to get so good and get so lined up that our vibration just controls everything around us? And we say, no, that's not what we've been saying. What we've been saying is get lined up, figure out what your path is, and go down that path. We are never saying to you, it's your job to get everybody in the world to vibrate in alignment with what you want. That's not your work. Because the diversity of your planet says everybody's doing their own thing. So the path of least resistance sometimes means making a choice about something that somebody else might not like that just feels better to you. We're just wanting to help you sort of free yourselves to the understanding that you get to choose and that you get better and better at feeling whether your choices are the path of least resistance choice or a path of more resistance choice.
So with family, I think I have a big effect on other members' reality, just because, well, 2 kids, I tell them to do something and they do it.
Yeah, well, they'll be in our meeting later.
No, I have no aspirations of that at all. You're all safe.
Yeah, they'll say, we gave up our guidance system long time ago and we just do what our dad says.
But with work as well, and I travel all over the world with work, and so I do affect, not direct people's reality, but I mean, we're interacting all day, and
yes,
it happens, and then they go off and take what they've learned and
yes,
apply it, and so there is an effect that I have on a lot of realities, I think.
Always. Always. But the thing that we're talking about here, the thing that we really want you to feel, we want you all somehow today to find permission for yourself in overt ways and more subtle ways to grant yourself the permission to follow the thought and eventually the inspiration to act that really feels good to you. It really feels good to you. So when you wanted to visit with us, what is on your mind?
We call it nose butter, by the way, the dog. One of my kids came up with that. When I found you a couple of years ago, so many things just resonated, and my own truths that I had denied for a long time.
There, that's the piece that we're reaching for. Because you were close enough in vibrational proximity. When you talk about finding resonance with who you are, you were close enough in vibrational proximity that what you were hearing here felt like the path of least resistance. And because it wasn't a strong stretch for you, you adapted to the vibration of who you really are easily. And the evidence of that release of resistance was clear. And we want you to understand that it's going to continue to be just more of the same, just on bigger things and more subtle things. It's interesting because sometimes big goals activate within you bigger resistance. So you have blind spots where more subtle goals activate more subtle resistance, and it's easier to deal with it. You're all sort of feeling that, aren't you? In the beginning, when people find this work, first thing they feel is freedom from it, and then they start feeling responsibility from it. And so people will say, is it normal for all hell to break loose in my life once I begin this work? And we say, yes, because you're getting more focused on who you really are and what you want. So your relationship to that becomes more obvious to you. Your own guidance system sort of kicks in so that you can feel whether you're following your path of least resistance or not. But the thing that so often we want to convey, especially to you, is that your intentions are so well in place that now putting emphasis on really feeling your way along the path is the piece that is going to be the most satisfying to you. We said to Esther recently, you've collected enough data to keep yourself busy for 20 or 30 lifetimes. This is no longer the data collection phase of your life. This is the feeling, the subtleties of your alignment or not phase, so that you can watch the universe yielding to you in endless transforming experiences. In other words, you said the words and we want to say them back to you in a stronger way. It's time for you to really come into your own. Really come into your own. And most of you are a little too modest and a little too humble to really come into your own. You've got this sort of resistance thing about you and makes us want to shout to you. You are the energy that creates worlds. You came with such passion and intention. Don't hold back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.